Welcome to the next session. Really delighted and happy to welcome Amanda Piña and Cecilia Vallejos here to talk about the School of Mountains and Waters, which is the second studio of the ATD lectorate, which Patricia introduced earlier. We're especially delighted that Cecilia made it here after some attempts by the train to disrupt her travel here last night from Germany. So thank you to her after a long night, and also to Amanda, who's come out of rehearsals and a very intensive schedule. So we're really appreciative that you're both able to be here. So just to give a short introduction and allow us to settle back in. Amanda Piña is a Chilean-Mexican, Austrian-based artist living between Vienna and Mexico City. Her work embodies the political and social power of movement, grounded in indigenous forms of knowledge and world-making, maintaining practices. Piña is a plurifaceted artist working through choreographic and dance research, creating and curating educational frameworks, writing and editing publications around what she refers to as endangered human movement practices. Her work is concerned with the decolonization of the arts, and it is to be found within performing and visual arts contexts, and including in the Holland Festival coming up soon in June. If you would like to see her new piece there. I know you look at me with terrified face as I reference that, but her new work, Exotica, will be on in the Holland Festival in June, so get your ticket quick. And Cecilia Vallejos is a dramaturg and researcher, graduating from Artes and from Das Arts, and a producer of her own theatre works. Since 2020, together with the visual artist Matthijs de Bruin, she's been coordinating a chair at the Department of Visual Arts at the University of Kassel in Germany. And we were very fortunate in our lectorate to have both Amanda and Cecilia as fellows within the program that's called Third, which is our third cycle research program. So for artist researchers who are postmasters and exploring third cycle artistic research, which is partly how I am lucky enough to know both of them. So over to both of you, and they're going to talk about the School of Mountains and Waters iteration in Chile, and I know your plan is to present this very much as a kind of working, thinking together kind of session, so there'll also be a chance to think, reflect together with them about this work.
Thank you very much, Laura, for the generous presentations, and thank you very much for everybody to be here. I thought to start from the personal first, and to tell you a bit the story of how I came to think about working with mountains and waters in the first place. So 2017, this brings us back to 2017, where the community where I grew up in Santiago de Chile started to be affected by the effects of mining in the waters. Everything starts with a very poetic imaginary. There are pumas coming down from the mountains to the city, and this is very weird. And the people in the city or in the mountain villages where I grew up start to ask themselves, why are the pumas coming down and what this means? And they are looking for food, but they are also looking for water. So in the connection with this sort of announcement of these big lions from the south, coming in people's gardens, climbing trees, being afraid, trying to drink water from swimming pools. And the illegal expansion of a mining open pit in the heights of this region. There is kind of a moment in which the people, the communities living close to the mining project, start to get very worried. And among them, my mother. And while they get very worried about this issue of water, they start to test the water of the river and find levels in metales pesados, heavy metals, 30% above the norm, 40% above the norm. This is an area in which people, it's outside of the urban limits, so a lot of people drink water from wells. So if the river is polluted, the wells, and all this panic starts to unfold, and it reaches me through my mother. So I start to be confronted with this terrifying thing of like the mining companies expanding, and if they continue expanding, we are going to have to leave, we are going to lose the house, we're going to lose the water. So the desire to work in this project does not come from an artistic sort of intentionality to say, oh, now I'm going to work on this, but it came really to me like a sort of a slap on the back. And it made me encounter the tools I had, which are art. In that moment, I thought, like, why I'm not a lawyer or something else? But decided to say, like, this is what I can do. My mother told me, we need to do something. This is urgent. We need to do something. I said, like, okay, we need to do something. And the only thing I know to do, more or less well, this is to others to judge, is art. So I started to work on that, and I started to work in Europe, and I started to work in COVID times and researching. In the frame of that, I met Cecilia there, and we started to bounce these ideas back and forth. And the first thing that Cecilia told me, and that was very important for me, was if you're going to work on that terrain and if you're going to work on that topic, this is not going to be an event. This is not going to be a short-time project. This is going to be a long-term commitment. And long story short, did some performances about the topic in Europe, in different places, managed to do a version of this in Austria first, because I work in the context of Europe, and it's very difficult to find funding in Chile to realize projects that don't come from mining. So it took a while till we finally, through these different attempts of working in Europe, got funding to do the project in Chile. That was not exactly coming from mining, but almost. So close to. We will explain that later, but not from the mining company that we were, using as case study. Yeah. So the School of Mountains and Waters has two very important sources of inspiration, like the Chilean iteration. I'm going to talk about today. We're going to present what we did in Chile. And also like brainstorm a bit in which way and what is possible to do in the Fortress Europe in relation to these topics. Because if we're talking about climate change, the complexity of the phenomena is all very, often like sort of simplified, or some narrative, as you both mentioned at the beginning of today's encounter. So, or second part, let's say. So, the two main and important allies in the project are Leonel Lienlaf, which is a Mapuche poet, is also ¿cómo podría decir un Mapuche alto rango?
A high-level Mapuche, in a way that is.
He comes from a very old lineage, so he's a Mapuche of a high lineage.
So within the social organization of the Mapuche social group, let's say, he has a high standard because he's a poet, because of the family.
And and their family was long time working on diplomacy with the Chilean state. So he's a Huilliche, Mapuche Huilliche. And the other very important collaborator is Juan José Ramírez Catira, who Laura and some of the people that are here already know, is a long-time collaborator of mine, and I work together in different projects with their help and advice. So yes, today we are going to talk a bit about how we frame the project in Chile, and also maybe to start explain a bit the moment in which we are allowed to go to do this project, like the political context. It's after the constitution fails through a perfect engineering work of media terror from the right wings. So the new constitution failed. That was gonna repuzzle the ecological agenda, really put it in the center, and it was gonna be a reference to four other extractivist countries in this moment of transition. And it was highlighted towards, like it was really made towards una transición ecológica justa, like a justice, ecological and transition, environmental transition, energy transition. Upon this moment of failure, we realized that the title of the project has to be changed because the project contains really many different parts, but one of the titles had to be changed. It was called Montañas en Resistencia, and that was very scary at the moment, so we had to call it Living Mountains. So this is the political climate was sort of very towards the right, polarized at that moment, particular moment, and sort of it was all what we wanted to do at the beginning was very scary for obvious reasons, like mining companies are huge. I will talk later a bit about Anglo-American, but it's like one of the 5th big mining companies in the world. They did their capital through mining extraction in Africa, and they have a very long and bloody history of extraction in different places and a long story of mining accidents and displacements of people.
And a very strong lobby, political lobby.
Very strong
so
lobby.
It's not so easy to denounce or to outline their actions or accidents. So that makes it also very difficult to act and to just say this is wrong. It's basically you have to be much more sophisticated to reach a certain community audience, politicians, other politicians, the parliament. So.
And the question of the school came really out of the several invitations. Like maybe it's important to say that the whole frame, it was kind of interesting. There was in one hand Siemens Foundation, like offering the possibility to realize and to fund the project in Chile, but there was also interest from GAM, which you know, Andy, like the biggest cultural center or more kind of representative cultural center in Santiago de Chile, in a building that was made by Allende 50 years after the coup, so it was kind of everything very loaded. And also Museo del Niño Mirador, like a children museum, which is part of the government. So it gets funded directly from the government, and it's like the way Chile educates the generations of school kids that go to this interactive museum to know about, to learn certain language, that allows extraction to happen, among other things. And that is the language of modernity, coloniality, and the language of nature as natural resource, etc., etc. So there is a new direction in the museum that is interested in different things.
Basically, in counter-narrate that and to insert more artists working from topics that can make a detour to the narrative that the Science Museum for Kids had so far. So, and these were also, in a way, allies. They really liked your project, so they also invited you. They provide whatever they could as facilitating. They were very open to see what formats could work or which not. So these complicities were also made through being in the same political line, in a way, so we can say that.
Yeah, and also being like in the opposition almost, no? Because the climate was so, I mean, the president is from the left, but the climate was so difficult at the moment that it felt like the president was opposition almost. Yeah? So the idea of the school started already like before. We thought of it in Chile, but always thinking about this topic, no? Anglo-American, the expansion of the mine illegal, the way they are, what are they doing there, the impossibility to go and see because they are, you cannot enter. The inability of the governments to really sort of be able to legislate around or to look what they are doing somehow, say this year, still here, totally freedom of them to do what they want in that mountain. And also one of the main topics of the work, and maybe just to frame it at the beginning, is that the mountain we are talking about is not only a mountain. It's an apu. It has been always an apu, and it's continued to be, and it's coming back to be strongly an apu, which is very interesting. So an apu is not only a mountain. For those of you that not know, there are mountains. In Quechua, for example, there are people, and people mountains. And Runacuna is people, and Tiracuna is people mountains, or people earth, actually, because it can be also a volcano, it can be also a lake, a Tiracuna. It's not only, it's earth. It's a Spanicismo from tierra, so people earth. And within that configuration, this Apu has been a place, a very important place of influence by the Inca Empire. So there are offerings. There is a mummified kid who was offered to the mountain being before the Spanish arrived. And the valley has been always a place of encounter of culture. So Mapuche, Huilliche, and Pehuenche forms of thought and practice encounter in this valley. Andean, Aymara, Quechua forms of thinking, and all other peoples who descend from them or who are related to them. So the frame of the mountain is how can we defend this as a being that has a body, that is active in the production of water, and not to defend a landscape, not to defend geology, not to defend natural resource, not to defend tourism.
Yeah, with all these conditions around, let's call it project for now, but I think we need to find another word in the coming year maybe for that, because it's not something that is easily defined as a project. But then we thought, then how, within these conditions of political conjunction, interest, factors of identity, of how also Chile identifies with a mining identity, which is very important. Chile, since you learned it in the school, is a mining.
Yeah, we learned that Chile is a mining country,
but could be glacier country as well. So other groups of activists are also trying to shift that identity, which is a matter of narrative, but it's not something you can do overnight. So the format of thinking of a school was also to think of how to intervene in that reality, how not to organize one action, two action, a protest or a community. It's how to intervene in a long term with something that can slowly blossom through knowledge, through relationships among different people, for younger generations, for adults. So it has an agenda that was also conceived as a long term, and therefore we thought that the school was the best name, actually.
Exactly. As a school of unlearning, it was mentioned before, but also to maybe intervene in settings like this museum for children, where children are, in a way, they are kind of modeled to think in certain ways, right? Through the encounter with this museum, where you can activate all this knowledge of science, right? And in that configuration, that museum, also the other cultural center in the city, are and have been part of modernity coloniality and the pedagogies of modernity coloniality. So there is this continuation, and the idea of the school is to intervene into these places where this pedagogy is being transmitted, to somehow hijack the way that information flows and to propose other experiences.
So that maybe we need to talk about our intentions and the aims, like going like walking blind towards, okay, we do in a school, how do we do it? So let us not really call it goals, but then we said, what is our intention? How do we position ourselves ideologically, politically, in terms of narrative? Are we going to sublimate? Are we going to just tell? Are we going to let it happen? So
what are the tools?
Yeah, what are the tools
to use? No? And if we were thinking to somehow in the different modalities use different tools, but of course thinking about learning through identification, which is also where is the place where indigenous practice and performing arts meet, I think, or maybe where the place where practices that come from dance and performance really can meet indigenous practices. So how can we use this form of knowledge through identification to create another experience that somehow can hijack this idea that the mountain is just material, just an object, etc.
Because also then we thought several times of, okay, when do you actually learn something? It's like when something comes to you as an experience. So then from that moment on, we started to filter the idea like, okay, so then what do we need to create an experience? For adults, for kids, what are the streamlined, or how can we say, what are the ways we can format and articulate differently the information to provoke that experience in different target groups, in different situations with different conditions. So in a museum for kids, how can we make school situations that are not so boring, but that also might provoke an experience for them to be close to the topicality of the mountain, the lack of water, the draw.
Exactly, and I wanted to frame that a bit. So in Chile we are experiencing, and I say we, one of my we's, experiencing a drought, and it's a very advanced drought, so it's a desertification of the land from the north towards the south. So it's like, it is already, the government has issued an emergency plan. It is an emergency plan. So what are the intentions in that context and for the different spaces in which we were working, also thinking of the land and thinking of the territory we were going to work with, not as material, not as object, but as endowed with knowledge, with experience, and as my teachers say, with, like everything, with a hand, eyes, and the possibility to speak. So we are not framing the project from a new materialist perspective. This is an indigenous perspective. Things are not material, things are people. And these people have eyes, and these eyes are different eyes, and they are formed differently, and they see different things, and it might not be possible for science to call it an eye. The hand might be possible not to call it a hand. But interestingly enough, contemporary research sort of discovers today what indigenous perspectives in Abya Yala knew for a very long time.
So then maybe we can also tell how important it was for us to choose people, valid people that could give us information. I mean, the information was not only in internet, it was also like talking to people, having conversations with friends. Especially I'm not from Chile, so I had to get acquainted with a reality that was not my reality. I didn't know so well the political trajectory of the new government. So I had to come to terms to that and very quickly see what was my decision of focus on what. So then also, establishing ways of getting the information through other people. So we talk with geologists, anthropologists.
Exactly. Definitely. And should we start with because it has different modules, so
yes.
Maybe because if we follow the slides we can make more sense. Maybe we start first with the kids, so there are different parts. But maybe, to summarize, like how Cecilia was saying, there are these different parts of the project. One is this workshop with kids that produces certain material that can be shown in the exhibition for kids. So I was invited to show a previous work, Divina Presencia, in the museum, but it's not really for kids.
Well, the new curators, they have to work with that name, but although they work within and try to change that, but it is a museum that...
Yeah. So in a way, because the other materials were not so much for kids, we wanted also to bring the kids that we are going to work with in the workshop inside the exhibition. So we created this, the first thing we attempted was this workshop, right? With kids in order to work with schools, different schools of, ¿cómo se dice? Riesgo social?
People that are on the edge of, how
like
do you say?
Schools, poor schools, precarious schools in precarious neighborhoods around the museum. That was our first target group. And to work with them in order to identify also in which way, what are they learning about this topic? Because the mountain in Santiago is here. You cannot ignore it, like it's all the time there. You can see it, you are living with it. So the first thing was this workshop, Montañas Fantásticas.
And they were kids of in between 9 and 12? And I think you will show the video now?
I'm going to show pictures and we can talk about it.
Then the groups were large, so we had to make several days of activities, and the activities had 3 modules, let's say, where one at the first moment you got a sort of a introduction lecture. You also got a book where you could write impressions.
And in this introduction lecture, we invited activists from the Corporación en Defensa de la Cuenca del Mapocho, which are the activists that are defending the river basin from mining extraction in Santiago. So that there are 2 rivers that nourish the city, and they are both being impacted at the head of the river by mining.
Then the kids got a tailor-made class that could explain in easy language what the problem was, how, if they knew it or not, and then they could write down whatever they understood. And then we gave small exercises for them to really try to capture or to write on, with their own words what they understood about the circumstance of lack of water, mining, which one were
what
the
is the relation? This is not taught to children. This was very transgressive, like to bring activists to give a lecture to kids. Like it was like almost in secret because the museum is related to the government. But also the artistic maneuver there was to think, okay, we want the kids to become mountains and to talk from the perspective of the mountains in a way for them to become close to them and to think and feel from their perspective. So that was the whole point.
So in a way, we try to incorporate fiction within the dispositive of learning. Like how can you really give an assignment of transform yourself without just saying, now we transform ourselves, but really like how to use a digital fiction where they could be in, where they could be part of an image, that they could become invisible and visible through a trick, a digital trick. So actually, yeah, we had particular costumes.
Exactly. Well, they wrote poems. Like if I would be a mountain, I would like that the forest and continue to live and with me, and that together, me and the forest, we can take care of the peoples. If I would be glacier, I would be very generous. I would give water to all vegetation. I would feed the water sources, and I would give the skin of the ones walking. I would like refresh the skin of the walkers, so that they can get refreshed in the mountains.
The exercise was very simple. They like write in I form as if you would be water, if you would be mountain. So they didn't have any complexity or was not an exercise of poetry, but was just simple write down as if you would be a mountain, and then you become a mountain later with a certain costumes that allows you to do.
Yeah, and to become, and they would be like of course the light. Like the light people of the film said, they would be makeup and, they would do kind of everything. There was a camera that they could press play. They were creating these images. And I don't work usually with kids, so it was not an intention to work with kids, but it was like, if we're going to do something that can be useful in relation to activist efforts today, to think about this mountain in a different way and to protect it, I think we need to involve that target group, because otherwise, they are the future. They are going to live the consequences of this extraction, this brutal extraction that we're going to talk now a bit about it, but that is totally irrational.
Also introducing new words, so like when we introduce them, like, do you know what is a waste of mining? And some of them say yes, some of them say waste of mining. Or
mine tailings are a taboo in the country. Yeah. So you don't talk about tailing dams. You cannot even say the word relave, because it's like relave. We were repeating this word a lot, like a weapon, relave. Do you know that there is a relave 20 kilometers away from your place?
The relave is also a place where these deposits can break any time, and it's like a lava of waste that can, it's just acid or so then we were insisting, like, can we show the maps of that? Can we really make available this new geography that is going to be your geography in 20 years or in 10? And then also, how do you say that? Like, we also refer to, do you recall any moments where water is a problem in your house, in your school? And so they were not forced, but suggested to think about, like, do you know the problem of water in Chile? Yeah. Do you know it happens in your family? So they would say, oh yeah, my mother always tells me that I have to have short showers. Oh yeah.
And what it was very important for me was that at the same time there was this idea of showing the piece climatic dances in a later moment in the city, and that we were working together with my ancestors, direct and indirect, who were part of this activist association to defend the territory. So that was sort of happening together, like waters that find each other and continue to flow together, which gave momentum to the project in all the different stages. And at the same time we were working with the children, we were already planning then the other two elements. So there was the exhibition already in this museum, and there was going to be the performative walk, which is more like the artistic and activist context for adults from the city, from different social groups and sort of also different class configurations. It was supposed to be free, so you needed to anmelden on time, inscribe on time. Yeah. But it was a trip towards the Central Andes, towards the place in which this mining company was supposed to grow and expand through this project, Los Bronces Integrados, which I'm going to explain just. So by being in the territory and going to see the kids, I think these two experiences somehow fed in each other.
Yes.
Also, by starting to talk with experts for the other part of the project, which is the more discursive project, the Mountain Talks, where we are going to find different expertises and different knowledges in relation to this area, to those mountains, to those waters, in order to sort of breathe them into a narration during the trip towards the mountain in a audio. Yeah.
So basically, the first workshop with kids also served us as a warming up to recognize which kind of material we could use later to articulate a performative situation for people to keep on learning about the mountain, but from another perspective. That those would be adults. The cooperation was with a production house. And then we needed to make different maneuvers. So it was not a class, but was something that also had to allow, again, for you to experience what is the problematic condition of the mountains and the waters in Chile, but in another form, probably in a more poetic form.
More artistic form.
Yeah.
And in a way, because of the resources and because of the different places the project was happening, we decided that everything would feed into each other, so we would not waste. That was very important because the resources are more scarce than in Europe. Like we said, okay, we're going to do the Mountain Talks. We are going to use that again. And if we're going to do this with the kids, we're going to use that again. And, we're going to recycle the project in itself. This is my mother recording the audio for the audio tour. And that was also very important to me. So the mountains and mothers are very connected in the practice, in the artistic practice of creating this project. And ancestry plays a very important role. Thinking about also non-human ancestors that through the intaking of water that is co-produced by mountains and many other beings form our bones and create who we are. So that is from indigenous perspectives, Mapuche, Huilliche and Wixárika, a knowledge that is always passed on and always insisted on. But because of the narrative of the species that we have inherited from modernity coloniality, somehow we are not part of others. We are not made of others. We are only made of monkeys and their ancestors. And that is very weird. Because in that place between these two mountains, the Mapuche ancient history that is not written anywhere, and that is a total alternative history to Spanish written history, tell us that there was a sea between those two mountains, and that in that sea all types of sea creatures lived and flourished and produced very, very sort of multiple worlds. And through the time, the different deities sort of allowed the other mountains to grow and push the sea towards the coastal line where it's today. And in that place, all these bones and remains formed the mountains, or the base of the mountains. So where the water surfaces in the Andes carries these bones and seashells and structures. And the water of Santiago is 75% produced by these huge mountain bodies, Apu bodies, I would say, knowledgeable bodies. So when this water goes through and nourishes our bones, which are being still nourished and formed today because they are not finished, those bodies are made our own. So it's crazy to think that our bones are made of animals and other creatures, ancestors of a very old ocean. So we did it. We had this audio. It had different stories.
The location we work on is the Parque Yerba Loca, that is located 1 hour from the center, the city center, where the cultural center that kind of help us or host us to present this project is. So we had to make an hour of soundtrack or audio.
20 minutes.
An hour and 20 minutes. Not to keep the people busy, but that was also one maneuver we could also use to keep on working on how to intervene into the narrative of the lack of water, into the narrative of exploitation of the land. So then we just made an hour and 20 minutes soundtrack, which contained several parts, and that was a whole project in itself, because you worked closely with...
all these people of the mountain talks, no?
Yes, but also with the designer of the sound, because
exactly.
It couldn't be just data coming to you. So we had to make it in a way that was pleasantly listened while you are in a bus, arriving to the location where something else would happen. So that was also the whole design of that introductory part.
Mm-hmm. And now to go a bit about Anglo-American and to propose and like to explain you a bit what they are doing. The company basically started to expand in 2013 without permission, without environmental permit, and without permission from the government. And they built a 9 kilometers long tunnel under the glaciers, 2 glaciers. So La Paloma Glacier, which nourishes Rio Mapocho, which is one of the main hydric rivers of the city, and to El Olivares Glacier, which nourishes the other river, Maipo, which are the 2 rivers in which this valley takes shape and is formed and it's watered by. These 2 glaciers are being melted by the mining extraction, through a process that is called black carbon, which is like the tronaduras, like the mining explosions, and also the tailing dams produce dust, which sticks into the glaciers and warms them.
Yeah.
So they are being today suffocated by this mining company. 2023, melting glaciers. Amazing. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So we use this expertise of people from geology, from anthropology, people from activism, local activism from the city, coming from a more like popular context, Puente Alto, in order to reuse the expertise of activists and the knowledge that it already exists, critical knowledge about Anglo-American, to construct this narration so that people would arrive to the mountain already knowing what is happening, but also intertwined with fiction, with personal stories, with stories about my mother, and with stories about the future.
This is how we also structure things. Everything was done in the territory, so there was not much table work, but a lot of decisions took place on how do we compose this for the talks, for the contents, for the sound design. So basically we work every day in every location, either in the museum or at the mountain. That was something also very exhausting, no?
Yes.
To work at the mountain, to choreograph in the mountain, to make the images there.
Yeah, and maybe just to finish, sort of talking about like what happened in the mountain, where we went with different groups of people to walk upon this, the place in which this huge subterranean mine was going to be built under a natural reserve. The idea was not to think, okay, we're going to go to the mountain to connect with nature. Let's think we are already connected by umbilical cords of water that nourish our bones, that are made of ancestral information and other bodies. But let's walk on the mining of the future. Let's walk on top of the mine of the future, of this gigantic hole in which, resources are being extracted to never come back. For a mining company that is based in London, which, all things were going to transform into capital, but that capital is not coming back.
Some people knew that they were in that natural reserve, that we just as a location knew that the project would happen underneath, and some didn't. So for some of them, that was fiction. So they thought we made a project about a possible future scenario. And some people knew about it. So that is the level of information of how things are being known, by whom, let's say. So,
and it was very important for us, and just I want to conclude there, and throwing also this question for us to share, not to think about this project as a project like site-specific performance, but to think of it as a Tirakuna specific, like people Earth specific. And through the work with Leonellian Lab, which has situated knowledge about waters and mountains in the Andean context as well as in the south, through their knowledge of ancestral chantings, in which the waters and the woods attract each other and are in conversation and decide to meet and surface together in this conversation and meeting in places where people rest when they are walking up the mountain, like this fresh oasis called Minocos or Menocos. Through that knowledge that Leo carries, we could start listening to the intelligent body of the mountain, made of many other bodies, nurturing our body in real time through these umbilical cords of water.
Actually, the relationship we have with Leonel and with Katira, at least for me, that was the first time I was so close. We also learn within the school. We learn within the collaborative team how to listen to each other, how to be surprised by each other's skills or knowledge. And that was quite revealing.
Mm-hmm. And we used these images for the campaign against the mining expansion. So we created this hashtag, and we did, with each group we went to the mountain, these images, and then would feed the campaign. We are now in the campaign. The project was sort of rejected, and we were very happy, but the mining company appealed to the Council of Ministers, so a superior instance, and it depends on the Council of Ministers now if they're going to do it or not. They want to do it because the investment is very high. Bread for today, hunger for tomorrow, and continuing with this movement towards melting glaciers. I don't need to comment on the irrational project. That is.
Do you have the short clip?
Trailer? You want to see a short trailer?
Because that is done from the top, so then you can have the impression of after the sound that you hear, you came down from the bus, you came into the location, there was someone receiving the group, and then you walk for almost an hour together with other people, but in silence. So that was specific as well, because then you were kind of together but alone with all that you have been hearing before, and in these settings that the scale was a different one, that was not a projection, that was you, and then within that walk you could see certain things in specific spots, and that was also the choreographic intervention of that. Okay, but just...
Hoy emprenderemos un viaje siguiendo diferentes cursos de agua. Rastrearemos los flujos del agua potable de Santiago hasta sus orígenes. Cavernas y napas subterráneas, contenedores montañosos, capas de sedimentos calcáreos. Nos sumergiremos en diferentes historias para resurgir en otra geografía y en otros tiempos, imaginando juntos el futuro de las aguas en el Valle de Santiago. Este viaje comienza en tiempos inmemoriales. So it would be nice to open for question conversation now. I think that was our presentation, and now we can think together.
Are there any questions or reflections? Thank you. That was an absolutely astounding presentation. I suppose, I have a language question, which is a little mundane, but just about the term unlearning. This is a very popular term at the moment in Fortress Europe, in art institutions, both on the small scale and the large scale. And I just wanted, to hear more about your approach to that term in terms of colonial knowledge.
So when I started to do my first School of Unlearning, it was in 2016, 15, I think, and people were like, okay, what is this? And I had to do it because my work in that moment was dealing with animal-human relations and with Amerindian iconography and Amerindian knowledge. And in order not to create something that people would think is contemporary art, because it was not inside the lineage of forgiveness, but it was part of a lineage of remembering and ancestrality. I needed to create a context, and in that context I thought the school was the best, and I called it the School of the Jaguar. And I know that we are like in decolonial fashion now, but I would like to highlight the fact that this decolonial work has been done non-stop, ongoing from coloniality till today. So I'm not so concerned about fashion at the moment.
For me, from the pedagogy of learning, especially since the last 3 years that I work with young artists, is more the unlearning it has to do with not being medium-oriented, but more context-oriented. And for that, then you need to visualize different maneuvers to get to that. So we don't know if unlearning is the best word. We are just trying to flesh it out.
But I think there is a lot of unlearning that has to be done. And if I think about these children and when they draw the environment and they were never part of, or if I think about the words nature, I call the N word, I don't like to use it. I think it reproduces the problem. It's always outside. So I think this unlearning is super important. And if institutions with money are taking, as usual, the ideas of artists, practicing artists which are independent, this is kind of how things go. No? We can criticize that, and I think it's important. But at the same time, I don't think that that project is finished very soon. It's a project that we have and we can work on for, I think, the centuries to come, to undo the way in which we have been, sort of, our thinking and our language have been formatted to think and to perceive others as objects. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring. I have maybe like a question and a short thing. Like, I don't know if probably you know the work of Marisol de la Cadena, Earth.
She's a big reference on my work.
Okay.
And in the frame of DAS, maybe I'm getting you a bit dizzy with this, I'm sorry. But in the frame of DAS, we created a series of videos, and one is with Marisol de la Cadena, where we discussed and tried to think from mountains and in relationship with mountains. So I really invite you to see that, because this is part of
the third talks platform. You can find it online.
So Marisol de la Cadena and many others were really important for thinking together in conversation how to create this work and how to make it not be an event, but to be a long-term commitment.
And then I was wondering, because you mentioned how indigenous knowledges use similar tools to performing arts. If you want to say something more about that.
Yeah, maybe it's nice how you phrase it. I don't think I said that, but I meant that knowing through, not knowing through distance and isolation of relations, but knowing through identification and embodiment is something we share. And that allows me to be able to enter into this conversation with my collaborators, but always having in mind, and this is a very important tool, I took it from Marisol, an ontological gap. There is something I don't get, and I'm not supposed to understand it. And I can try to imagine what it is, what Katira or Leonel are talking towards or pointing towards. But I want to keep this gap, and I want to also keep this gap in relation to the audience. I think this is something that the School of the Jaguar can do also in relation to Fahim and the other people that are part of the school, which is to somehow allow that gap to exist, and not to assume that all things are translatable or all things are understandable, but that we can sort of meet in between in this idea of an ecology of forms of knowledge that we try to do also with these mountain talks or the Jaguar talks, to have people coming from science, from activism, from art, and from indigenous practices and knowledge, allowing all forms of knowledge to be experimental forms of knowledge, because they don't anymore resort to the institutionalization of them, because otherwise this hierarchy between them would never be undone. The idea of practicing this ecology of forms of knowing is to temporarily take care of undoing these hierarchies. And I think art is a place where this can happen. More questions, ideas. I like ideas more because I like the idea of retribution, like you know. And in the last presentation I did somewhere, it was very interesting because somebody came with this idea that now I said like this is a great idea. To not think about site-specific, because site-specific would be to go and put something on top. And I think in the School of Mountains in Chile, it was for us a big learning to understand the territory doesn't allow that. Because there is so much extraction that happens there already. And what it wants to say and how it wants to talk, and through which tools we can listen, you know, to what the territory wants to say, what the waters want to tell. And one way was really the chantings, no? The Mapuche chantings were very important.
Actually, one interesting question that a student made to me was like, but who's the director of the School of the Mountains of the World? Yes, that was a very nice. I never thought about that, but it's something that we need to think of that answer. You know, like.
Well, I think it happens now in different configurations and different relations and different complicities. No, somehow. We worked on in Chile, especially like having a very clear frame of what it was possible to do and how to formulate that. But then other parts were done with other people and in different configurations.
Yeah, and I think that is also for you a challenge of, negotiating authorship in a different way. I mean, maybe there, as an artist, you will be in charge of several things, but not really authoring anything that has the same impact as a piece of theater or as a book or as a film. But still, you will be, negotiating information with different partners that will produce something together. So it's a different plane of authoring something, but I wouldn't say also it's not collective. It's like it has another.
In a way, it happens in collaboration. No? That's how we author it, like in collaboration with different people.
Cooperations, because they were also different. Some of them were artistic, some of them were more conceptual, some of them were aesthetic. And you came with your team, which already is used to work together. I came along in this iteration of Chile, but artistically I didn't intervene much, so you took the decision. So,
Well, maybe since we also have... Oh, sorry. Sorry, Rajni.
No, it's fine. I'm sort of only half sure that I have a question or a comment, and I'm not sure what it is. But I guess I was just thinking about time and the different ways that time operates in bodies, in human bodies, in bodies of water, in mountains, and just wondering about those different timescales working together and alongside each other, and how that manifests in the project. And I guess also maybe there's an assumption here from me, but I'm curious about the role of patience.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you.
Patience and urgency, because sometimes you have to act very fast, like come now in 2 weeks. You know?
I think that this is a bit like, I think the whole audio is constructed in a way that we are starting to move through the city, going in the under earth tunnel that take us to this place. It's a highway. In the case of Chile, it's like a partially private highway that can take us to the mountain fast enough. And while entering in this tunnel, we start with a geological formation of the mountains, not only from the scientific perspective, but also from the perspective of Mapuche oral history. And that part of the audio, which is called La formación de los Andes y el tiempo profundo, the formation of the Andes and the waters of deep time, somehow slows everything down to start. So your intuition is totally right. And then we think about how these time scales are so different, because the water needs 500 years, one drop of water needs 500 years to go from the mountain to a neighborhood like Quilicura.
So the water we drink today.
The water we are drinking today is 500. It took 500 years to move under the earth, and that is a very kind of, for me, it was a shock to understand that. So we are talking about a scale in which things happen slow, and an extraction that happens like this. This tunnel was made in 1 year. And it's made with a technology that, and Chile does not have for public project. The scale of the scale of time, it's also somehow in relation with the scale of power that the mountains have. Because if you find today un entierro, or if you find today some archaeological vestige, those objects can still have the power today to kick off the mining company. If you find a Nazca line, that Nazca line still is powerful today to avoid extraction in that place, but not the people, not the communities. So this power is very also, ¿cómo se dice? Asymmetrical. In the same way like the temporalities that we are working with. So there is something about the amount of power and the capacity to make so huge transformations in processes that took so long to happen.
It's also interesting to think of the time and when we made the exercise of accelerating and imagine ourselves in the future, and then your mother appears as you 30 years later, talking about something we wrote. So these transpositions, or
a dream.
Well, a dream, but then to listen to your mother talking like you in the future, that was also that for all of us was like,
yeah, that one is called the being of the mountain and the waters of the future. And it's a dream that I had, but we place it like if now I would be 80 like my mother. So if I would remember that I had this dream today, I had it in 2000, like 5 years ago. And in the dream I saw this apu entering my room, like I felt this apu entering my room. And I also saw diamonds, and then that was interesting research methodology, because then I went on the computer and discovered that Anglo-American did its money with diamonds, and I had dreamt. So in a way, the Apu and my mother and me, and now Cecilia also, because she was living there, could feel each other in the relation of the project. So I would like to think that there's a collaboration also with the Apu.
Actually, being embedded in the location is quite important to make this. Like, I don't think we can reproduce it with some models again in another city. We need to be embedded again. We need to research again, or make dispositives to research. So it's not okay, now we reproduce that everywhere.
It's impossible. But maybe to say that I did a previous iteration in Austria. It was very different. So it doesn't allow itself so much.
Sure. It is a practice, actually.
It's a practice.
It's not a method. It's a practice. And I think now we know it.
Yeah.
So.
How are we doing on time, Sabina? Kind of lost track of. Oh, nice. And then maybe after Joy we should go for the go for a break.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have a question about working with kids and what you said about using words that are maybe taboo and kind of repeating that. What is your idea behind it? And for reference, yesterday we talked about avoiding certain language because working with kids. So, I'm really curious to hear what you think about that.
I think if you are living in a place where there are 490 tailing dams that have very toxic material all around you, it's important that kids know. And it's not nice to know that, but it's also very, very important because you can be breathing this without knowing. And as a state of Chile, they want to hide this. The companies want to hide this. And there are cases of tailing dams that have been so destructive to communities, and they bring poison. They can break. They are in the heads of the rivers. And it's not about want to scare kids. I don't think it was the effect. No. They were very happy. They became mountains, but they also, by the way, learned what mining does. In a museum that was, that has this copper. Chile exports copper to the world. And it has this copper roof, and this museum is made from mining money. Yes. So in a way, it was very important for me. Actually, what I wanted to do in the museum was to do an interactive game for kids, which was going to be called "Know Your Tailing Dam." So depending on which neighborhood you live, you could locate it and look what's happening. I don't know.
It was something also more, about using the words that was important because I think we brought them at the same level of conversation, and for them that was very, very important also to be part of something that will be shown in the museum, and for the families as well. The parents came to the opening. It was the first time they saw their kids in a screen in a museum, part of an installation. All that brought it to a level of saying we speak, you need to learn these words so we can all discuss because it's our problem. I don't know if I imagine that for myself, how good is that, how effective is that, but I think the whole mood of let's put some information on the table and talk it. It was there and they were part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this happened through language, basically.
Yeah. And through becoming the mountain, which was a very interesting thing. And we saw the most impressive improvisations happening by the kids. To become the mountain is something that ancestrally, I think we know, everybody knows how to do. Since our ancestors come from the beginning of the world.
Thank you. Thank you both. I don't really want to stop, but let's have a break, and then since the last section is also a reflection session, perhaps also ideas will come there. But thank you so much, Amanda and Cecilia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.